Buonasera. Thank you for Professor Cornetti and you for coming along this afternoon. Many years ago I did my doctorate thesis, doctorate, on Pennecar's interreligious hermeneutics. I think the two go together because the interreligious dialogo interreligio and dialogo interculturale are very much the same. One is more theological and the other is more philosophical. What I aim to do is hit various themes, one of which is my recent involvement in the Spirit of Religion project, about which I will say more. And in context of that, my emphasis is actually going to be on the dialogue between Aboriginal Australian and, for want of a better word, European Christian. In reference to Pennecar, back to this philosophy, theology thing, and dialogue of religions and dialogue of cultures, it's very much the same principles, because with cultures or religion we are always dealing with something mystical and mythical at the heart. Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, all the world religions have texts, books, Bible, Quran. So we meet and we discuss the Quran and the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, etc. With indigenous peoples, there is no text. For Pennecar himself, it was only late in life he was interested in all the religions and all the classic cultures, the Greek and the Roman and etc. And later in life he said, what about the indigenous peoples? The most difficult, the strongest misunderstanding of peoples has probably been European peoples and Australian indigenous peoples, Aboriginal peoples. But essentially, the European mentality, which I have, lives in time. Aboriginal people live in space. For 200 years plus, it was very difficult for Europeans to understand Aboriginal people, and if anybody did the adapting, it was the Aboriginal people who adapted somewhat to the European way. A couple of words about the impact of colonisation, which took away Aboriginal sense of identity and their culture. The time of initial Aboriginal habitation of Australia is still a matter of dialogue, but somewhere between 40 and 40,000, probably to 60,000 years. It is claimed that Aboriginal culture is the longest continuous human culture on Earth. What I'd like to just mention is the negative impact of colonisation that of course occurred not just to Aboriginal peoples in Australia, but to indigenous peoples throughout South America, to peoples in Africa, etc. The impact of colonisation on Aboriginal people has therefore generally been very negative. From some points of view, it was unintended. There were the effects of European diseases for which they had no immunity. So many died. But more devastating in many ways was the overtaking of land and resources, and particularly dispossessing people of their land. You put this in Italia, a stolen generation. So this was an attempt, well-meaning, but a very devastatingly negative impact on Aboriginal people. They took the children away from their families and put them in white people's families or orphanages to bring them up as Europeans. While I could speak a lot about all the negative things, there are today some good things that are happening. For example, just recently, in 2008, the Australian government finally admitted this and asked forgiveness for doing this. And Aboriginal people are increasingly now coming to universities, they're developing their arts, many more of them are being involved in education, and there is greater appreciation of what the Aboriginal people have to offer the future of our world as a people and a culture. I just want to finish then with some slides.
Finisce con alcune
very quick images. And this is an example in one way of Christian indigenous dialogue. But the Aboriginal people are very gifted with art, and this is a series of on creation, the Genesis story of creation.
Allora, intanto ringraziamo il professor Collo per questa lezione istruttiva, ricca, semplice ma in realtà, come avete visto, molto complessa. Ha gettato dei semi, ci ha fatto intravedere dei percorsi possibili, soprattutto attraverso immagini, attraverso icone. E poi devo dire, questa è una cosa che in un'università italiana è interessante, col corpo. Cioè il professor Collo parla col corpo, e in Italia il professore di filosofia non lo fa questo. Anch'io, eppure col corpo, c'è una certa dimestichezza, tendo a stare qua dietro e a dare uno schermo, a difendermi da... E questo è importantissimo, perché diciamo il corpo è decisivo in qualsiasi tipo di relazione. Ora, se volete fare qualche domanda, sia per maggiore informazione, sia diciamo per approfondire qualche aspetto delle varie cose che il professore ha detto, si può fare.
How we could accept other religion, we Christian, while one of the principles of the Christianism is to convert other people to the Christian religion.
A very good question. At least in the Catholic Church in recent times, there's strong emphasis on the importance of Catholic Christians being involved in interreligious dialogue. So sometimes it's called proclamation and dialogue. So there's two things. Now, perhaps, look, I'm sorry to take, but someone said to me in terms of, I'm involved in a Catholic-Muslim dialogue, and someone said, be very careful of those Muslims, they want to convert you. Particularly monotheism, but not entirely, I think. But, like John Paul II said in an encyclical, that all Christians are called to dialogue. And now in the same encyclical he says, like, proclaiming Christ to the world is very central to what it is to be a Christian. So it almost sounds as if there's a tension, and there is. We need to meet human beings at the level of deep respect for who they are and what they believe, and to establish dialogue with them on those terms. If in the process of dialogue, I mean, we must be open to conversion ourselves. I mean, if we get involved in dialogue at a deep level, we might want to cross over. I mean, cultures and religions are in a process of constant transformation, and at this point in human history, it's happening really quickly.
What do you think about Ayers Rock? That it's so sacred for Aboriginal people, and white people can climb up and take picture?
Well, that's because you want you Italians to come to Australia and spend your money.
Yeah.
Maybe. Look, that's a very good question. We now call it Uluru, which is the Aboriginal word. Huh?
Yeah.
So Ayers Rock, Ayr was an Englishman. You know, so eventually these names are going back. And the custodians of Uluru are the Aboriginal people of that area. It's their decision. Now they have decided, and there's something wonderful about the Aboriginal people, I find. There's a gentle, but they don't say, look, you can't climb that rock, right? They say, we would prefer you not to climb that rock because it's sacred. But if you choose, well, you choose. I mean, they're very generous, spirited, but I'm with you. I've never done this before, to talk about Aboriginal people, because by myself. Because Auntie Jane and I do it together. Right? And my reluctance is, you've heard a European Australian talk to you about this people that I love and admire and everything, but it's still a non-Aboriginal perspective.
Nel momento in cui gli aborigeni si convertono, diciamo, al cristianesimo, cioè tendono a scindere la tradizione loro originaria dal cristianesimo, oppure c'è una commistione di elementi? E se c'è, come si rapportano con la Chiesa come istituzione? Cioè, cosa ne pensa la Chiesa di questa...
When there's a conversion from aboriginal to Christianity, she asks if there's a commission of elements, the two traditions, and how the church sees this fact.
But generally, people are born into it. As Aboriginal people, they're born Protestants or Catholics. I actually know 2 or 3 Aboriginal women who are artists and who have become Catholic as adults. And the reason they became Catholic was because they understood that the Catholic approach respected the traditions of the indigenous peoples.
Bene, se non ci sono altre domande io direi di concludere questa lezione estremamente istruttiva. Ci ho dato molto materiale per la seconda parte del corso sul Panica, quindi vi ringraziamo nuovamente.